Book on habits, right? And so I came in with a little bit of maybe not the right mindset, maybe not the right attitude around this book. And I was very pleasantly surprised about how practical the applications are, how specific the systems are. Um, Usually I feel like there's a lot of an overemphasis sometimes on the big why, and we just need to want things more and be more committed to this, that, and the other thing to get where we want to go. But this is a very, very scientific book. It's a very specific book, and it's a very enjoyable book. So before we dive in, anybody who has anything that they would feel comfortable throwing in the chat around, hey, I want to learn, what do you want to try and get out of today? What are some questions you might have around habits, habit formations? Or what would be really helpful as we work through some of the systems that are presented in this book, what are some of the habits that you want to get better at? What are some things that you would like to improve from a habit standpoint? Or what are some things that you would like to stop doing, right? Because our habits might not all be good ones, right? So if there's anything that you are interested in specifically, or any habits that you want to, us to break down in some examples later on in the presentation, throw those in the chat box right now for me if you could. And as you come up with them, feel free to continue to just drop those in. I will need some examples at some point. So the first question that came to mind is, or the first thing that we wanted to address was, why atomic habits, right? And like the GIF I put in the Facebook group last night, as well as, what is the popularized thing around atomic is these big, massive explosions. And it's a perfect representation of what we're going for here, which is very small changes. You think about the atom, and when you split that, the big impact that it has, right? What are the very small changes that can take place that are going to drive substantial change in our lives or in our businesses? One of the big takeaways from the book, one of the things they establish right out of the gate is that small and consistent is better than big and sporadic, right? Putting in a Herculean effort one day a week or dieting really, really strictly for 12 hours is not necessarily going to achieve the results that we want. However, making better small decisions over time will lead to better outcomes. And those small decisions show up in the form of our habits. So 50% of the things that we do in a given day, half of our actions are habitual. Half of our actions are things that we do subconsciously or unconsciously as a part of a system that we have built out, right? I'm sure that our morning routines look pretty similar day to day. We brush our teeth before we comb our hair. We comb our hair before we brush our teeth, or we shave before we get in the shower, after we get out of the shower, whatever it is, right? So with so much of our lives being made up, being almost automated already, our ability to make small tweaks to those those automated systems called our habits is going to allow us to have a substantial impact on our life with relatively small effort, right? And the great visual example that they use is if a plane is flying from LA to New York, and the nose of the plane is adjusted just 7 feet, 7 feet in one direction. At takeoff, that plane is going to land in Washington, D.C. instead of New York City, right? So it's about the width of my arms, right, is how far the tip of that plane moves in one direction, and you end up, 6 hours away or more from your intended destination as that plane flies across the country. And our habits impact a lot of the same things. one of the great examples that they use is this idea of 1% improvement, right? So I always love the example of, now, if you can find something that gives a daily return of 1%, please let me know, because it would be a great investment. And what you see here is a 1% return on investment starting with $100. It's a $100 bill over 5 years, right? So we hear and say and preach a lot in Keller Williams that you can be anywhere you want to be in 5 years, right? And so this is the 5-year timeline of the 1% return. Within the first year, $100 turns into $3,741, right? So it's a very substantial return just inside of a year with that compounding once a day. At the end of the second year, it's $140,000, which isn't bad. Into the third year, you're at 5.3 million. The fourth year, almost 200 million at 199 million. And then what you see along the far side of that graph is what happens in the last year, which is it's to $7.5 billion, right, at the end of the fifth year. And so what we look at, or what we take away from this, is that there are almost imperceptible differences in the final outcome, right, with this 1% return. However, right, in a very short period of time, in 5 years, right, the sum goes up and up and up and up. And then the 5 years after this, you know, that hockey stick continues. So what does that mean about our habits? Well, here's the way I like to break it down. Here's the way that I look at it. If I'm awake for 8 hours a day and I am working for 8 hours a day, or excuse me, I'm asleep for 8 hours a day and I'm working for 8 hours a day and I'm doing the other things in my life for 8 hours a day, right? Let's say that's the stereotypical division of anyone's day. What is 1% of any of those segments? It's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes of your workday, right? So when we think about 1% improvement, what is the improvement that can be made inside of 5 minutes? And we're going to talk about that as a strategy later on. A way to establish good habits is by shrinking the time frame. But if I want to get better in my workday, what can I do in 5 minutes? What's the 5-minute improvement, right? What are the 5 minutes that I need to meditate or stretch before I go to sleep to get a better night's sleep? It's the 5 minutes I need to do right when I wake up. What are the 5 minutes that I need to do to unpack and compartmentalize my day to spend more and better time with my family, right? Because in any segment of your day, sleep, work, life, 5 minutes is going to be that 1%. And so if we can improve that 1% and we continue to hold that improvement over time, there is an exponential impact on our lives down the road. It's one of the hardest things about habit formation, though, is that the rewards are far down the line. We'll talk about how to navigate that. But when you think about, and when we look at some habits here in a minute, I want to talk through, you know, what's the 5 minutes? What are the smallest possible change that you can make? So one thing that I love that this book did was the establishment of the dichotomy between goals and habits. And for my entire life, I've been heavily focused on and committed to having big goals, having the right goals, leaning in and being accountable to those goals. That's a wonderful thing. And there is a framework of behaviors and habits and identity that are going to drive you to that goal. But if you just have the goals, right, there are some limitations to just having goals. First of all, and I loved this, winners and losers have the same goals. There is no difference between the guy that finishes 8th in the heat against Michael Phelps and his goal to win a gold medal, and Michael Phelps's goal to win a gold medal, right? And so winners and losers having the same goals is the first thing that should tell us The goals aren't the differentiating factor amongst our immediate peer set, right? Now, if Michael Phelps's goal to win a gold medal and mine is not, right? Like those goals are gonna take us in different directions. But having the goal doesn't necessarily create the right outcome. The other thing is that goals are finite. And I know that we have a consistent cadence of goal setting. We have our business planning clinic, we have our GPSs, we have our 411. We get these things dialed down and we make it, right, a habit. But if we don't do all those things, like our culture here supports us doing, our goals can be finite, which means they're destination oriented. When we get there, we're done, right? And um, that binary nature of goals leads to it can actually impede our long-term progress. I'm going to skip down to that fourth bullet point. It can actually impede our long-term process because we end up yo-yoing, right? We talk about like the yo-yo diet, right? I'm going to lose this weight, and then because I hit my goal, I then and just I'm done trying to lose weight, and I end up gaining it back until I get to the point that I don't like the number that's on the scale, or I don't like the way my clothes fit, and so I set a goal to get back in shape or lose that weight again, right? So they become very either or, and that creates challenges for true long-term progress because all of our effort is going back into getting to where we were instead of maintaining progress to go beyond. And that's a habit, a strong habit, and a strong identity that supports strong habits is what's going to drive that exponential long-term success. And the final thing is that goals can limit happiness, right? And this is, we see this, we see both sides of this, or all sides of this, I guess, throughout our lives. Maybe we see it with our children, we see it with our spouses, we see it in ourselves. But there's a lot of benefit to delayed gratification. There's a lot of benefit to resisting the opportunity to engage in the get on the hedonic treadmill, right, and just seek pleasure. There's benefits to that. And yet, whenever we look at our goals as the time that we get to be happy, I'll be happy when X happens. I'll be happy when Y takes place or when I achieve Z, right? Those can create really unhealthy relationships with goals. Because if our goals are finite and big, right, and we're stretching towards them and we don't achieve them, and then we deny ourselves happiness despite maybe accomplishing something great, there's a lot of danger in that because then we start to resent our goals or resent the process of setting goals. So the challenges of goals are not that they are in and of themselves bad or not a necessary part of the equation, but they cannot be the only thing that we consider. So I thought this was really great because our goals have to lead to our habits. And more importantly, so we're gonna in the example they give in the book, they refer to them as outcomes, right? And so they give the example, and this one hit pretty close to home for yours truly, about this idea that we set goals and then we support them with behaviors in hopes of becoming someone or something different or better, right? And so we would say, all right, I am going to lose weight, right? So that's my goal. And so I'm going to start going to the gym. And once I'm in shape, I'm going to feel better about myself, right? And, probably top 3 favorite things out of this book for me is flipping that on its head. And I thought that this was a really brilliant way to approach mindset. And they do it in this framework of identity, right? And so instead of looking at your challenges, right, or what you want to accomplish as I want to save money, or I want to lose weight, or I want more business, right? Instead, and then that leading you to do things that ultimately change the way you look at yourself. Start with the identity piece. Start from the inside out and say, I'm going to be a person that lead generates. I'm going to be a person that's healthy. I'm going to be a person who doesn't have to worry about retirement because I save, because I have good financial success, right? And then if we identify that way and we're able to ask the question, what would a healthy person do? Would a healthy person stay up late watching Netflix and miss the gym in the morning, or would a healthy person have a cup of tea and go to bed so that they could be up and be rested for the next day? Would a financially savvy or financially a fiscally conservative person that wants a strong retirement position, would they invest in penny stocks and Dogecoin, or would they go to the Vanguard funds or index funds? Right? What are the things that a person like that would do? And the more we ask those questions, the more we find we find ourselves, unfortunately, knowing the answer, which will then lead to behaviors, which will then lead to outcomes. And this is this slight shift in how we're approaching the goal versus who I am versus what I do leads to a higher degree of sustainability for the things that we're doing. Because losing the weight by going to the gym and getting in better shape, or so that I like the way that I look, or not spending, or I want to save money, so I stop eating out altogether, and then I'm a person who is who cooks all their own meals. Those, you're building it in the wrong direction, and as soon as something bigger than your current outcome or your current goal or your current opportunity comes along, it can topple it over. But if the foundation is in who you are, right, that's transferable to all different scenarios, all different situations, and all different challenges. And you can consistently ask the question, right? Is this what a great real estate agent does? Is this the way that a leader behaves? Right? What would somebody who is an athlete do in this situation? Right? And so when we change our identity, it makes it easier to change our processes, which makes it easier to change our outcomes. So that's the foundation of this book and this conversation is related. It's relating it to, we want to make small changes. We want to make them in alignment with our identities while we're pointed at our goals. So when do we actually get into this habit stuff? And that is right now, right? And so very heady, or somewhat heady and scientific in the book. This book is, it builds off of some decades-long research by some other individuals. And then James Clear picks it up and solidifies it into more actionable and practical elements. But there are 4 main phases of what takes place during a habit. 4 main stages or phases. So first there's a cue, something happens. Next there's a craving, right? Because something happened, we now want something. And we will respond. We respond in that very moment. And then there's a reward for the response that we have to that craving. So the cue to craving component is called the problem phase, right? So where something happens and we have an internal reaction, right? A problem is there. And then that rolls into, that craving triggers a response, and then the response to reward is a solution phase. We do something to get something. Something happens to us and we feel a way. We do something and we feel a different way, right? So there's a lot of really good examples. The easiest ones are probably the bad ones, which are going to be, we're met with a challenging person or problem at work, right? Our clients yelling at us, or we're late, or we have to sit through another meeting. We're in this situation, and so that's the cue, right? And the craving, right, is this: I feel powerless. I need to feel in control, right? And now moving into solution phase, to feel in control, I'm going to pull out my phone and I'm going to log on to Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. And now I feel in control, I feel aware, I feel satisfied. And the habit loop that gets reinforced here, right, is that when I'm met with a challenging problem or when I feel frustrated or powerless, I retreat away into my phone and I don't engage with my environment, right? And anyone who probably has teenagers has encountered this a lot, or or clients that are addicted to their phones, right? Well, it's the phone addiction is there as a reaction to some sort or a trained habit around some sort of external stimuli, something happening that's creating a craving that's leading them to do that, to seek the reward of control, awareness, whatever it is. And the cues aren't always that big, right? Maybe it is, if there are any former smokers in the audience today, there are certain places, certain times, certain events that lead smokers to smoke. For some of them, their triggers, the hardest cues, the cues that drive the cravings are. I know my dad used to smoke, and he said that it was every time he'd buckle his seatbelt, right? He's going somewhere, and distances were measured in cigarettes. Like, oh, it's probably 2 cigarettes away. And so when you get in the car, it triggers like, oh, we should be smoking now, right? Because the cue is we're driving somewhere. The craving is passing the time. The response is I light up a cigarette. The reward is I've now gotten from point A to point B, and I was able to enjoy the cigarette, enjoy the stimuli. People do it when they drink. People do it when they get stressed. Whatever it is, some people like it with a cup of coffee. Whatever it is, it doesn't. There's nothing about that one thing that makes it good to do while driving. It makes it good to do while having a cup of coffee or having a cocktail. But it's that the fact that we do them together or that one leads to the other is what drives that habit formation. And so what we're going to talk about is we've got awareness of this now. And that is, awareness is the number one superpower that we want to develop, to be aware of who we are and what we're doing. Now that we know this is how habits manifest themselves, what can we do to engineer better habits, right? So here is the cheat sheet from Atomic Habits on doing that. And we're gonna deep dive what this looks like in practice, some very specific ways to deal with this. So we have our 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. And then we have creating good habits and breaking bad habits. So to create a good habit, we want to build up the cue by making it obvious. Make the cue very obvious. Whatever the trigger is that is going to kick off our habit and lead to craving, we want to make that obvious. Whatever the craving component is, we want to make it very attractive. When it comes to the response portion, we want to make it easy to do, and the reward portion, we want to make it satisfying. And then from a bad habit standpoint, or wanting to stop certain behaviors, we're going to do the opposite. We want to make it less obvious or invisible. We want to make it less attractive. We want to make it more difficult, and we want to make it unsatisfying, or dare I say, painful. Right? So let's talk now about the first law and making things obvious, right? So there are a few things that they recommend around making your cues more obvious. The first one, which we should all be familiar with, anybody who has done Ignite or done Bold or participated in anything where there's an affirmation, right? They recommend these things called implementation implementation initiatives, or excuse me, intentions, right? And it's where we say, it just simply say out loud what you are going to do and when you are going to do it, right? So, when you wake up in the morning, say out loud, I am going to the gym to exercise for 30 minutes, right? And that creates the cue. I mean, you are cueing yourself, which I know seems like a little bit of a nested if statement, but it is very effective in that we are creatures that love consistency. So when we say a thing, we want to then do that thing. The second thing that they offer up as an opportunity is, and I think this is brilliant, I have already implemented this in my life as a change to my habits. I want to read more, and I don't find myself doing that enough. And so the cue for me to read is created by something they call habit stacking. So I mentioned earlier, we all already have routines, right? We have the way that we are going through the world. And if we don't think we do, all we need to do is observe, because the data would tell us that 50% of the things that we actually do each day are automated habits. So for me, part of my morning routine is I get up, I start the coffee pot, I take a shower, I then come out and I've made enough coffee for my coffee mug on the counter and my travel mug. So then I sit and I have 1 cup of coffee before I go out the door and get on my day. So my habit stack is, and typically I'd have that coffee and I would, catch up on what people posted in the Facebook group, or I would answer emails from my phone, or I would deal with, whatever stuff came into my personal inbox, right? So now the habit is I read while I have that cup of coffee. I read just a few pages, but I read while I have that cup of coffee. And then that puts me into reading every day. And all I did was align it with an existing habit. The key to that is my book is not in my desk drawer. My book is not in my closet. It's not on my nightstand. My book that I'm reading right now is sitting right where I sit when I have my morning cup of coffee. So I can't put my computer there. I can't put anything else there. So when I sit down to have a cup of coffee, my book's there, I pick it up and I start reading it, right? And so that habit stack is going to be, so far in a week, has been very powerful. And you can do the same thing. I've got a second book that sits on my pillow. When I get up, I make my bed, I put a book on my pillow, and that's so I read before I go to bed, right? And all I have to do now is make it to the kitchen table and make it to bed each night, and I am more likely to read because I have cued such an obvious obstacle, right? I've got to move that book to get into bed, so I might as well read it, right? I'd have to move that book to put my computer where I sit and have coffee, so I'm going to read it. And those really drive to a conversation that, if you've read The One Thing, you could be very familiar with, which is these are environmental things. Like a couple of examples that I gave are very environmental. So there's a lot of overlap in these strategies, but making it obvious is creating an environment where it stands out, making it easy, making it and tethering it to something that you are already doing, right? So the other example they give in the book is, after I brush my teeth, I will do 10 push-ups, right? After I get home, I will change out of work clothes into gym clothes, right? And so, there's a habit, you walk in the door, you put your bag down, you're doing those things. And if you just bolt on to the end of it, right? Think about that 1% difference. The first 5 minutes when you get home at night, what can you do differently in the first 5 minutes when you walk in the door at home at night? Is it change immediately in your gym clothes? Is it lock your briefcase away so you can't take workout? Whatever it is, that first 5 minutes is the 1% change we talked about earlier. But creating those implementation intentions, creating a habit stack, and then, tweaking your environment are things that are going to make those cues a lot more obvious. The second one, make it attractive. So similar to the habit stacking, the attractiveness can come by bundling. They call it temptation bundling, right? You pair an action that you want to do with an action that you have to do, right? So I'll go with a fitness example again. I love to eat gummy bears. I will make myself sick eating gummy bears. I will eat pounds of gummy bears in single sittings. But if I have a few gummy bears right after I work out, it's actually better for me because it spikes my insulin and helps my body take in more nutrients, right? So I will pair my gummy bear eating at the end of a hard workout, right? I still can't eat pounds at a time because that'll defeat the purpose. But I'm pairing my craving, the thing that I want, which is eating gummy bears, with the thing that I have to do, which is go work out, right? And that makes the idea of working out a lot more attractive, right? You could do something similar with your lead generation. We know the lead generation is the key to our businesses. And the more we do it, the more consistently we do it, the more business we will have. It is not always easy. It is seldom easy to get on the phone and start dialing and getting hung up on or feel like we're bothering our friends and family and our sphere of influence. So what is something that you want to do that you would only get to do after 5 phone calls, right? I saw Eddie Donnelly on here earlier. I don't know if he still is on here, but he was telling us the other night at an event that he would not have his first meal of the day until he had done so much lead generation. He said that it was, a little bit extreme, but incredibly effective, right? He didn't get to have his first meal until he had made his 20 contacts for the day or whatever the number was. He was appropriately motivated by food. And so he put what he wanted to do next to what he had to do. And that then created a scenario where he was lead generating every day, literally so he could eat, which then led to a creation of a business that paid the grocery bill. Another thing that makes habits attractive is getting involved with a community or culture that is going to have a positive impact on you, right? So making it attractive is there are three different groups that make certain behaviors attractive. They're the close, the many, and the powerful. So we will align ourselves with those communities that we are closest to in physical proximity and connectivity, right? So if there is a group of people that are lead generating for 2 to 3 hours a day in the office every morning, and you go sit in that room, it will be more attractive to you to be making phone calls than to sit there and not. There's also, and so that is your closeness, right? So take that as nothing other than me saying, come into the office, we have people lead generating. It is hard not to. Guys, when I have a hard time lead generating and just getting on the phone, I will go sit downstairs and make a couple phone calls with the guys just to get that rhythm going, to get myself busted out of whatever headspace I'm in. The second one is the many, right? So what a lot of people do is what a lot of people want to do, right? So if you can join a group and then join a large group, right? Join a group that's close or join a group that's big, and then finally the powerful, that is joining or being a part of groups, following the behaviors of powerful people or wealthy people, right? There's a reason that Eric Akbar always quotes Warren Buffett, and he's not being quoted on Warren's fitness regime or diet, right? The reason that it is attractive to be in alignment with Warren Buffett on your financial behaviors is because of his financial success. The reason that it is attractive to listen to successful people and align our behaviors with them is because of their success. So when you are thinking about a habit that you want to change, what community can you be a part of? What group can you join? Who can you align yourself with such that it changes your identity, right? And helps lead to easier behaviors and makes behaving in alignment with the community a lot more attractive. All right, third one, make it easy. Make it easy. So this is going to be really simple. We want to reduce friction to get to where we're going, right? And we want to make sure that we have a primed environment, right? There we go. If you've read the one thing, you know about building that bunker. So we want to make it easy to get into activity and stay into activity, right? If there are a lot of distractions at home and it makes it hard for us to lead generate, don't lead generate at home, right? Make it easy to do just that by going somewhere else, right? If your gym is 5 miles in the wrong direction from being on the way to your office, you're going to be less likely to go there because the friction of the time investment is going to lead you to say, oh, I just need to get to work. But if it's on your way to work, it's a completely different level of friction. The two main takeaways for this making it easy are to identify the decisive moment. The decisive moment in whether you will or will not do something. That's the response moment, right? And then tweak that, or your awareness of it alone is going to allow you to be prepared for it, right? The waitress is going to come ask if you want dessert, and you know that. And would a healthy, fit, athletic person get dessert 3 nights in a row? No, they wouldn't. Okay, now I know that it's coming. I'm just going to say no when the waitress comes. So that's one. You have to know what is the decisive moment that determines whether or not you call that next, you do the next piece of lead generation. What is the decisive moment? Is it, whether or not you have the list in front of you? If because as soon as you pick up your phone to find somebody to call, you get distracted, right? So then, how do we make it easy, prime the environment, and have that list ready the night before? And then there is, and this has been, I'm only a week in here, guys, so take it easy on me. There is a thing called the 2-minute rule. And that if you just say you're going to do something for 2 minutes, right? Or you shrink it down to like, what is that, 1%? I'm not going to read for an hour a day. I'm going to read for 5 minutes while I have a cup of coffee. That's my 1%, right? What's the 1%, or what's the 2 minutes, right? That you can, or 5 minutes in this case, that you can invest in whatever it is to just get going. So that way you're not sitting here thinking, I got to go to the gym for an hour. Oh, I got to read 3 chapters tonight. Oh, I got to make 20 contacts today. You don't. Make it easy for yourself. Just make 1 phone call. Just make 2 contacts, right? Whatever it is. And then the other way to make it easy is, invest in technology or systems that automate things for you. So think command with your quarterly call plans. Right? You wake up each day, you open up your command, there's 10 people to call, you call them, you did your thing, right? You want to call 10 more, go find 10 more to call, but those 10 are your 10 every day, right? And you automated that so you never have to think about who it is or what you're going to call them for. All right, and then the last thing, make it satisfying. Make it satisfying. So you have a few things as a human being that are going to be pretty easy triggers to make things satisfying. And they use some pretty ridiculous examples in the book that work very well, and I'll share those with you. The number one, I think we've all heard a lot, maybe, is Jerry Seinfeld's "Don't break the chain." And so if you want to create a habit, or you want to solidify, reinforce, or make a habit satisfying, just buy a calendar, or take the calendar on your wall, and every day that you do or don't do whatever it is, however you want to frame it, any day that you're successful with your habit, you put an X through that day. And then if you do it 2 days in a row, you got a pair of days that you've done it. On the third day, you now have a chain, right? And it is our intention as humans to not break the chain, right? We love consistency. Our brains are energy hogs. They're always looking for the most efficient way to get things done. And so as soon as a thing is a way, we want to keep it that way. And so when we create that change and we start to visualize it, create a visual for that change, it manifests itself in us wanting to keep adding X's, right? And then the other examples they use is, and I'm excited to try a couple of these myself, but they use the example of a guy in financial services who had to do a lot of lead generation. And he had a basket with 20 paper clips in it and an empty basket. And then every time he made a phone call, he moved the paper clip from one basket to the other. When he came in the next day, he moved it back from one basket to the other on every single call that he made. It might have been more than 20. I'm using 20 because that's our golden number, right? But every time, and that way, when those paper clips were moved, he was done with lead generation for the day, and his brain knew it. But if there were still paper clips in that basket, he knew he still had more calls to make, and his brain knew it, right? And so the satisfaction involved with emptying the basket is what was driving it. Now, that led to this individual being one of the most successful financial services salespeople in all of Canada, right? And so, but his secret was moving paper clips around in baskets. And that, and then finally the satisfying thing, I joked about the gummy bears, but that also ties in there, right? Like tie in, give yourself an immediate reward when you complete the habit, right? Immediately. They talk about how in the book, there's an adage that, what is punished is avoided, what's rewarded is repeated. But for us as humans, it's actually the immediacy of the punishment or reward, right? The biggest challenge that we have as human beings is that our brains haven't really evolved that much in the last 200,000 years, but the world around us has. And so what we needed previously was, we needed to eat when we got hungry, right? We had X response, X need, Y response, and it was all in very, very tight loops. Well, now we live in a world where we need to invest 17 to 18% of our money into a 401k or an IRA such that 40 years from now, we're going to be able to retire. Well, that is a heavily delayed gratification versus taking down a buffalo on the plains and being able to eat tonight. But we have not evolved beyond that. Only in our consciousness have we become more aware of the way that we work so that we can re-engineer our environments and our habits to create different changes. So that's a big challenge, is that solidifying stamp, right? There has to be some sort of ritual or activity that lets us know that the habit was completed and brings us joy. Now let's drive through breaking these bad habits, and then we'll open it up for any questions or any ahas. First law: make it invisible, right? If you want to drink less, you put the beer in the back of the fridge. You put the whiskey bottles in the cupboard, not on the bar cart, right? If you can't see it, I mean, this is how simple we are as creatures. If we don't see it, we won't want to do it. But if it's there and it's within arm's reach, right? This is the bowl of potato chips or the popcorn bag at the movies. No matter how big the popcorn bag is, we eat all the popcorn, right? So if we want to cue less, we have to make things less obvious, right? If there are certain things that drive us to want a cigarette, we need to avoid those. If there are certain things that drive us to overeat, we need to be very certain to avoid those. Or if it is, hey, I eat ice cream because it's in the freezer, then the decision moment is actually previously when you're at the grocery store, don't buy the ice cream, right? When it comes to making things unattractive, this is where that identity piece comes into play. As humans, psychologically, we want to be in alignment, right? We want to be consistent. So if we identify as a person that lead generates, or we are not a person who, we're a good business person, so we return calls within 24 hours. That's what good business people do, right? All of a sudden, not returning a call or a voicemail within 24 hours now makes us inconsistent with our identity. It creates this bad feeling and is really unattractive, right? Behaving inconsistently. And this goes all the way back to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. You give a dog a good name, right? Give a dog a good name and he'll live up to it, right? And so that's what we're doing here is we're making our bad habits unattractive by identifying as somebody different or better. The third piece around making it difficult, number one thing we can do here is add friction, right? So add steps to the process, make it more complicated to do that bad activity. And long before this book was written, when I was in college, I had a fraternity brother that would keep his credit card frozen inside of a cup of ice in his freezer, such that anytime he wanted to make a purchase, right, that was online or was a larger purchase, he would have to take that cup of solid ice out and sit it in his sink and wait for that credit card to thaw so that he could get all the information off of her, he could take it to the store. And that led to him making substantially less purchases because he wanted things in the moment and then 2 hours later had forgotten about it while he was waiting for the block of ice to thaw. So he made it more difficult for himself to spend money. What are the ways that you can do that, right? With it, where you make it more difficult to have an inbox full of things that you got to follow up on. You make it more difficult to waste time on non-dollar productive activities. How do you hide those things from yourself? How do you add steps and add friction to the process, right? And I promise you, it'll become very obvious, right? When you identify your bad habit, it'll become very obvious how you can add steps or add complexity to the response that is bad, right? This is the response phase. So, the cues and cravings may still show up. We have that decisive moment where, oh, I want to go spend something online, right? And make no mistake, guys, the rest of the world is fighting to give you bad habits. Amazon wants you to buy in one click, right? Everybody wants you to just, buy your leads or pay somebody for the follow-up or, pay somebody to do X, Y, or Z. And those are all well and good in their own measured ways. But if you identify it as a bad habit, adding friction to the environment will help. And I guess I should step back for a second and say, we use examples like exercise is a good habit and smoking is a bad habit. But, for the busy business owner with a few kids and some big at-home responsibilities, maybe automating your food orders or one-click Amazon is a really good thing to give you the life that you want, right? For the financially strapped individual that has the capacity to go to the grocery store and to shop for themselves, maybe the one-click Amazon and the food delivery service and the pre-prep meals, maybe those things are bad habits. You have to evaluate the things that you're doing in your life as good or bad, and then impact them differently. And the final thing around breaking bad habits is going to be related to getting an accountability partner. Making it unsatisfying. And one of those ways is to get an accountability partner. Ask somebody to watch your behavior and slap your hand. Another one is to create a contract And they have some pretty wild examples in the book of what some husbands and wives have done together. But you create a contract with somebody that it makes it costly, painful, and public when you execute that bad habit. When you get all the way down and you have the wrong response, you didn't make it difficult enough. Like, what is the pain that you're going to introduce into your environment? Is it, they use the example of, the couples that, every time they would go out to eat, if they went out to eat, they would have to pay, they would have to take an equivalent amount of money that they spend on their food and donate it to, they were Auburn fans, so they had to donate it to Alabama, right? Another one was, hey, anytime that I'm late to the gym, my personal trainer gets to, he gets a $100 bill, right? And that's in the contract. I've written it, I've signed it. So that way, that bad habit of being late to the gym is made very unsatisfying by, it costing me $100. So that is the 10,000 foot view of Atomic Habits. Again, really highly recommend this book. Immediately applicable. And I think there are so many great applications to our business in real estate, our business of lead generation, and our business of client services and business development. So I think there's a ton of opportunities for this to be immediately useful. I've already found ways in my personal life, and am excited to do some implementation starting next week in my professional life. And so big recommendation there. If I could make just one thing, it's think about that 1% change. Think about that 1%, that 5 minutes. For me, it is a change to 5 minutes while I drink my morning coffee, right? And now it's, the next look is at what happens in the first 5 minutes when I get home, what happens in the first 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes that I'm awake before I go to bed, right? First 5 minutes when I wake up. Those all are a little 1%. And yeah, I'm not going to read a book in a day, but I'll read more. I'll enjoy reading more, and it will become it's just what I do, right? And so there are opportunities for you with that, with your lead generation, with your lead follow-up, and with your business in general. So that being said, guys, we got a few minutes left here. Any ahas, any big takeaways, any questions, anything that wasn't clear we want to see again?
Hey, Mike, it's Cindy here.
Hey, Cindy.
Hey, you're not seeing me because I'm not for any kind of seeing anybody right now. Anyway, I love the fact that when you talked about why goals aren't enough, because I think that goal setting, I've taken goal setting classes to nauseum.
Right.
And pardon?
I said, right. Yeah. I was just affirming. Yeah.
Yeah. And they basically all say the same thing. I mean, there's a little variation here or there on goal setting, and we all do it. And I set goals every year of my life. I mean, it's ridiculous how many goal pages I have. And I love the fact that you said that they have the same goals. I mean, a winner and a loser has exactly the same goals if you're in the same arena.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the same arena. I mean, losers that are walking around that are just plain losers, of course, probably have no goals at all. But when you're putting apples to apples, and that part I found very fascinating to really think about that.
Cindy, that part blew my hair back. It really did, because I have been for so long. Yeah, I mean, for 20 years, right? I've been taught goal setting. I've been encouraged to goal set. I've been held accountable to my goals, right? And when they just come right out and say it, winners and losers have the same goals. Like, nobody's impressed by your goals, right?
Right.
That was definitely never heard it that way before, and I really enjoyed it. Made me think differently.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're in those goal setting classes, they always ask the question, who has their goals set for this year?
Right.
And then you look around, and then you people who set their goals have a tendency to look at the people who aren't raising their hand. You think, well, you're a loser because you didn't set your goals. But then you have to really be honest with yourself and say, wait a second, I set goals last year. I'm a loser too, because I never reached anything that I should have been doing.
Well, and and it's you reached it, but for how long? I mean, that's very autobiographical when I talk about the fact that, I'd set a goal to lose weight at the start of this year. And I went from 220 pounds down to 202 pounds. And I felt really good about that. But this morning I was 213 pounds. Right. So, I mean, like the goal didn't change. Right. But what happened was I hit it to the extent that I felt good. And then I backslid because it wasn't about habits. And so another big aha for me is, I don't need to read, 50 books a year. I need to read for 5 minutes a day.
Right.
Monica, you got your hand up?
Yeah, part of goal setting is having an action plan. So, it's great to set goals, but if you're not backing those goals up with an action plan, then you're not really setting your goals in line with what you're trying to accomplish. But what I did like about this is the shift in shrinking stuff down to create the habit and paying attention to what's distracting you away from the actions that you're supposed to be doing to attain the goal.
Yeah, and I felt that there were, as soon as it's like as soon as you know something or see something, you can't unknow it or unsee it.
Right.
It's funny. We have our monthly leadership team meeting today, and we order in lunch, and I know that Sierra is going to ask, what do I want from Chipotle? And so I know that today Mike wants to have a burrito with sour cream and cheese. That is not what today Mike needs to be eating, though, right? So yesterday, before I was in the position that she asked me, I said, hey, get me this tomorrow. Don't even ask me. Right. So you become aware of like that decision moment, and I put more friction into it because now I'd have to go change my order.
Right, because that's right. And your action plan, you have it in place along with your goals. And it's what are you doing that's taking you away from the action plan that you really need to be aware of?
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what happens. You get away from what actions you're supposed to be doing in the moment. So
and what's interesting, they talk about this in the book, is that the brain, human brain, like we are so drawn to recency and primacy, the first thing that happens and the last thing that happens, right? And so if we can control for those, right, think about like making those cues less obvious or more obvious, right? So what starts my habit, right, if I can control that, and then what makes it satisfying or unsatisfying, right? What is that reward, either physically, mentally, emotionally, at the end of that habit completion, right? It's no different than when you do your lead generation for the day, you feel completely different. Like in the mornings that I have read for 5 minutes, right, I just feel different throughout the day. And it's that 1% of my time at home, big difference.
I love the paperclip thing, only in that it's like it keeps you on the action. Like that the paper clips aren't done yet, so you're really not done with the action.
That's the one that I'm looking forward to implementing next week. I like when I read that, I was like, whether it's a bowl of marbles, I got to find something that I like, or something that's attractive or interesting, but physical, and then when it's done, and you need to see that it's done, especially in this industry, I think.
Yeah.
And
I think the bowl of marbles is great because it has noise to it.
Oh.
Paper clips is kind of weak.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I will listen, I'll keep you posted, Monica, on what that comes out to be. But I agree. I think that one is neat. I think that the sense of completion is something that is deeply ingrained in us. Yeah. And I think supported by our community. I also loved, there was so much where I was like, oh my gosh, yes, Keller Williams, right? I'm definitely
I'm sitting in a bold thing, be to have, or be to achieve, and now it is.
Yeah. No, but I just love it. So much they talked about how your community supports your behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. And how, and it's so funny, like the guys, I mentioned the guys and gals that come in and call here I'm in the Pepper Pike office today. They all make calls because they're all making calls, right? Everybody is building a business because everybody around you is building a business. And you see the same thing in the Rocky River office. There's a couple big teams that they have all their people in a few days a week. And so when everybody's in there, everybody's in there. right? And then, you know, you're not, when you're at work, you might as well work. I mean, that's you know, I mean, there's, I'm in the office as much as I can be because the environment supports me doing the things that the company needs to have done. So I thought that was really reinforcing for me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anything else? Art, any takeaways for you, sir?
You know, I had to take a call. I don't know what you guys all discussed just then, but it was just before I came to Keller Williams, I was just this ministry I would follow. We'll read his stuff. Mike Murdoch, he had a ministry, the Wisdom Center, and everything was about success and building a successful life. And one thing he said, he would say regularly, the secret of your success is found in your daily routine. I mean, I'm probably got it from a book somewhere. He recommended books too.
Mm-hmm.
But and then also, you know, the secret of your failure found in your daily routine.
Yeah.
So that's good. That 1% rule, and the brokerage I was at. Part of the reason I knew at the last brokerage I would go to, I would read the books, the self-help books, and I would actually read the books, and then the broker would grab a pen and pad when I come in his office and say, "Well, what books you reading?" And he would write down the books I'm reading. And then in one book I couldn't tell him I was reading because of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent. So I was like, if I'm reading the books for Keller Williams, I don't want to go over to Keller Williams. But there was something he's mentioned. I think it's continue, constant, and never-ending improvement. I forget the acronym, but I think he mentioned it before too. But just a little bit every day. I think it's Ross Perot that says something. You could do something a little better every day. Every day, just make something a little better. And after a while, it's just great change and great improvement. And like I think to myself, as long as the objects in the rearview mirror are getting smaller, then hey, it's not that bad. I'm making improvement. So
Yeah.
you know, making improvement.
Yeah, I think you know, there's just those little tweaks, but held over time, right? Like every Disney movie and every, you know, popularized piece of media, like, because we you know, talk about how, like, you know, what we were like 100,000, 200,000 years ago in terms of, like, you know, we're out on the Serengeti hunting for food that we need to eat today. We want big effort for big reward, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what's deeply worn into the grooves of our brain. We just haven't evolved out of it yet, and that's why our pleasure centers are triggered by, you know, the Mighty Ducks playing one good game and winning the, you know, the cup, right? And it's like that's not, you know, that's not how it works. Like, you know, you know, they take the most recent NFL season. Like, you know, Tom Brady gets in the gym at 4:30 in the morning every day, every single day. He doesn't play, you know, he didn't play his heart out to get the Super Bowl. He got in the gym at 4:30 every day, right? And so for us, that's going to show up in different ways. But it's, you know, it's, the neat thing is that with the systems that this book teaches, we can hit all of those pleasure centers in our brain like we're doing the big achievement, like we're doing the big activity, right? By rewarding, making it satisfying, making it obvious, making it easy, doing all those things that then, you know, let those small activities, you know, register for us, right? And I like what you said, that, like, you know, if the key to your success is found in your daily routine, and the key to your failures is, and I think it's funny, you know, the way that this book consistently juxtaposes good habits and bad habits, and actually how to evaluate them as one or the other. But, you know, so many times our failures we can point to externalities, right? And I think that's also, you know, say, oh, I didn't achieve my goal because X happened, right? And to Monica's point, like, if you just have the goal and it's binary, then it either happens or it doesn't. And when it doesn't happen, you turn around and you say, well, it didn't happen because my car broke down, or I didn't do X because Y happened, right? And we start to explain it. But when we have the plan and we have this awareness around who am I, what am I doing, and what outcomes is that bringing, really hard to say that, you know, what we do and don't achieve is based on externalities. Right. You know, those things, they impact us, right? Somebody cuts us off in traffic. That's a cue that creates a craving that leads to a response and a reward, which is usually honking on the horn and, you know, some sort of sign language, right? that thing is, yes, that's an externality, but the one component of all four was an externality, right? The other three we have to own.
And like about the pleasure spike, or the pleasure center in the brain, millionaire next door.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he talks about how the people who are millionaires, who become millionaires, they don't make a lot of money. Their salaries are not very high. They just work a structured budget. They look over their finances weekly, and they do the things on a regular basis to invest their money wisely. Versus, and they say that's not what people like to do. They like to hear have the game show. You know, the game show. Who wants to be a millionaire, and who wants to, you know, the whatever game show. That's where it all started with. I think, whoever wants to be a millionaire. But a lot of these game shows of just want a lot of money at once, and this excitement. And you know, it doesn't work like that. You know, it doesn't work like that. It's the
Nope. In
inch
my
by inch is a cinch, yard by yard is hard.
yeah, in my last career, when I first started, versus 5 years in, I was making a salary twice as much 5 years in as the day I started, and I was saving less money. Right? So it's not what you make, it's what you don't spend, right? Now I had a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, and like, you know, 27-year-old Mike, he was a good time, right? But at the end of the day, like, that's the lesson. Like, you can always make more money, but the difference for me is that 10 years ago, the money that I could have saved, where it would have me right now, right? And so you can't go back and lead generate yesterday. You can't go back and you know, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And so that's where, you know, another thing that just struck me to the heart is just do a little bit every day, right? Because that little bit that you do yesterday builds on what you're going to do tomorrow, right? You keep that streak alive, and then all of a sudden, I mean, here's the thing. Don't call 20 people a day. Call 10. That's 50 a week. That's 200 a month, right? Oh, you can't call 10, call 5. Right. Or just don't let a day go by that you don't make one lead generation contact. And then some days, man, when you feel, you know, that's, man, here's a great one. They said that the days where you don't want to do it and you only do it to the minimum extent, those make a bigger difference than the days that you really feel good and you want to do it, right? Like the bad sessions in the gym that keep your streak alive, the day where you go 0 for 10 on calls, right, that keep your streak alive, those are more important than the days that you go 15 for 15. Because what happens is when you don't do it, our lazy brain kicks back in and it starts telling us that, well, you didn't do it yesterday. You don't got to do it tomorrow either, right? And that streak starts in a completely different direction.
You know, one thing I've done with sports, I noticed is, I mean, everybody likes the game, but what I like too is what I like mainly now are the interviews. The interviews before and after the game, and or after the event, because it lets you it allows you to peek into the mind of the champion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Super Bowl, World Series, whatever, the interviews afterwards. And then I think it was Gabby Douglas that said something years ago in the Olympics, just what you said. She said, you're getting better when you're doing it on the date when you don't want to do it. That's when you're really getting better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I never forget that interview. It's not when you want to do it, it's the days that you don't want to do it and you push yourself to do it. She said, that's when you're really getting better.
Yeah, those are the days you should feel really good about yourself because you did it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the 66-day challenge.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been great. Thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, like, you know, follow up, you need the slide deck, you need anything from me, or if you have recommendations on like, hey, read this book so I don't have to. Like, that's the point of this, right? Like, if there's something that you want to glean, and again, like, the conversations are, you know, one part, here's what's in the book, but also how does it work for your business? What's the real takeaway? How's it tie into everything else that we already know? So appreciate you guys being here.